July 1950, Korea. A place most Americans at the time couldn't even find on a map is about to become a graveyard. The North Korean People's Army has just invaded. They are steamrolling south with Soviet T-34 tanks in overwhelming numbers. The South Korean military is collapsing. America needs to send troops immediately, or the entire peninsula falls. The first American ground combat unit to arrive? The 24th Infantry Regiment, an all-black regiment that has been stationed in Japan. They are rushed to Korea with barely any preparation, handed outdated equipment, given insufficient ammunition, thrown into the meat grinder against a superior enemy force. Over the next year, the 24th Infantry will fight in some of the hardest battles of the Korean War. They will face overwhelming odds. They will suffer terrible casualties. They will fight with courage and determination, and when it's over, they will be branded as cowards. The Army will blame them for every American retreat in Korea. Military leadership will use them as proof that black soldiers lack the will to fight. The press will call them bug-out soldiers who ran from combat. The regiment will be disbanded in disgrace in 1951. For 50 years, the men of the 24th Infantry will carry the shame of that accusation. Veterans will hide their service. Families will be embarrassed. The official record will say they failed. But here's the truth that took half a century to come out. They didn't fail. They were set up to fail. They were given the worst equipment, the worst officers, the worst assignments. And when the entire army struggled against the North Korean onslaught, and black soldiers got all the blame. This is the story of the 24th Infantry Regiment, the last segregated combat unit in American military history, the regiment that was scapegoated to justify racism, and the men who fought for a country that refused to fight for them. Before we dive deeper into this forgotten injustice, it's worth pausing for a moment. Stories like this didn't disappear by accident. They were buried because they were uncomfortable. If you believe recovering this kind of history matters, subscribing helps us keep these investigations alive. Now let's go back and understand how the story of the 24th Infantry really began. To understand what happened to the 24th Infantry, you need to understand where they came from. The 24th Infantry Regiment was formed in 1869, right after the Civil War. For over 80 years, it was one of the U.S. Army's legendary Buffalo Soldier regiments, all black units commanded by white officers. They fought in the Indian Wars. They served in the Spanish-American War. They fought in the Philippines. They were deployed to the Mexican border. For 8 decades, black soldiers in the 24th Infantry served their country with distinction. But they always served segregated, separate barracks, separate mess halls, separate everything. By 1948, things were supposed to change. President Harry Truman signed Executive Order 9981, officially desegregating the U.S. military. But there was a problem. The order didn't have a timeline. It didn't have enforcement mechanisms. It just said segregation should end as rapidly as possible. The Army interpreted as rapidly as possible to mean, we'll get around to it, nor eventually. By June 1950, when the Korean War started, the Army was still almost entirely segregated. Black soldiers served in all black units under white officers. The 24th Infantry Regiment was one of the largest of these units. They were stationed in Japan as part of the occupation force, and about 3,000 soldiers, mostly black enlisted men with mostly white officers in command positions. When North Korea invaded South Korea on June 25, 1950, The 24th Infantry was one of the closest available American combat units. On July 12, 1950, they were among the first American ground troops to enter combat in Korea. They weren't ready. The regiment had been a garrison unit in peaceful Japan. They'd done occupation duty, guard posts, administrative work, maintaining equipment. They hadn't trained for full-scale combat in years. But that was true of all American units in Japan at the time. The entire military had gotten soft during the occupation. Nobody was prepared for Korea. But when things went badly, only the Black Regiment got blamed for it. July 1950. The 24th Infantry Regiment lands in Korea and immediately gets thrown into hell. The situation is desperate. North Korean forces are advancing rapidly. They have Soviet T-34 tanks. American forces have almost no anti-tank weapons that can stop them. The South Korean army has nearly collapsed. The 24th Infantry is sent to defend the Kum River line. Their mission: hold back the North Korean advance long enough for more American reinforcements to arrive. They are given obsolete equipment, M1 Garand rifles that jam, because they are worn-out leftovers from World War II. Insufficient ammunition. Inadequate anti-tank weapons. No air support because the Air Force is stretched too thin, and they are sent against an enemy that outnumbers them significantly. July 20th, 1950. The Battle of Yecheon. The 24th Infantry's first major engagement. They attack a North Korean position and actually succeed. They capture the town. They inflict casualties on the enemy. While historians debate the strategic scale of this battle today, at the time, it was hailed as the first significant American ground victory of the war. The press back home reports it. Negro troops halt Red Drive. For a moment, the 24th Infantry looks like heroes. But that moment doesn't last. Over the next weeks, the situation deteriorates. North Korean forces keep advancing. American units keep retreating. Everyone is retreating. White units, black units, everyone. The North Koreans have superiority in numbers, equipment, and position. But when the 24th Infantry retreats, the reports frame it differently. When white units withdraw, it's called tactical repositioning, or trading space for time. When the 24th Infantry withdraws, it's called bugging out and cowardice. The racism in the reporting is blatant. A white officer from another unit writes, "The 24th Infantry ran like rabbits." Meanwhile, his own unit had retreated from the same battlefield the day before. By August 1950, a narrative is forming. The war is going badly because black soldiers can't fight. It's not true. The war is going badly because the entire U.S. military was unprepared, because North Korea had numerical and equipment superiority. But the truth doesn't matter when you need a scapegoat. September 1950. The narrative against the 24th Infantry has solidified. General Douglas MacArthur's headquarters is looking for explanations for why the Korean War started so badly. The easy answer? Blame the segregated unit. Military reports start emphasizing every instance where the 24th Infantry withdrew from combat. They downplay or ignore the fact that white units were withdrawing just as often. But it wasn't just talk. It was legal action. Court-martials start happening. When soldiers from the 24th Infantry are accused of desertion or cowardice, they are prosecuted aggressively. Let's look at the hard numbers that historians uncovered decades later. They are shocking. Between August and October 1950 alone, 116 soldiers from the 24th Infantry were convicted of serious charges like misbehavior before the enemy. Now, compare that to the all-white 27th Infantry Regiment. They fought on the same flank. They retreated from the same battles under the same pressure. Yet, in that same period, 0 soldiers from the 27th were convicted of the same charge. 116 convictions versus 0. Same situation, same retreat, different skin color, different justice. Some of these court-martials were justified. In any combat unit, some soldiers will crack under pressure. This does not mean every white officer was racist or that every criticism was false, but when historians later examined the full record, the pattern became impossible to ignore. Black soldiers faced harsher judgment and harsher punishment, but the statistical pattern is undeniable. Black soldiers faced harsher judgment and harsher punishment. And here's the part that makes it even worse. The officers testifying against these black soldiers were often the same white officers who'd failed to properly train and equip them. Lieutenant Colonel Samuel Pierce, a black officer in the regiment, later testified, "Our men were being court-martialed for things that were happening in every regiment in Korea, but only our men were being punished for it." But here's what the official narrative ignored. Despite the bias, despite the bad gear, the 24th Infantry actually fought well when given a fair chance. When historians years later went back and actually analyzed combat records objectively, they found something shocking. The 24th Infantry's combat performance was statistically identical to white regiments facing similar conditions. And they had heroes, real heroes. Private William Thompson, July 1950, near Haemun, Korea. His platoon is being overrun by North Korean forces. Thompson is operating a machine gun. He is wounded, bleeding, but he refuses to withdraw. He tells his platoon to pull back while he holds the line. He stays behind. Alone, firing his machine gun into the swarm of enemy soldiers. He saves dozens of lives before being overrun and killed. For this action, Private Thompson becomes the first black American to receive the Medal of Honor since the Spanish-American War. And Thompson wasn't the only one. The spirit of the regiment was proven again less than a year later, just months before they were disbanded. June 1951, near Chippo-Ri, Sergeant Cornelius H. Charlton. When his platoon leader was wounded, Charlton took command. He rallied his men and led 3 separate charges up a heavily defended hill. Despite a severe chest wound from a grenade, he refused medical attention. He single-handedly destroyed an enemy gun emplacement that was pinning his men down. He died taking that hill. He too received the Medal of Honor posthumously. 2 Medals of Honor, 9 Silver Stars, 131 Bronze Stars. These are not the statistics of a cowardly regiment. These are the statistics of men fighting for their lives and for each other. But those decorations got buried in the narrative. The press didn't want to report black heroism. Military leadership didn't want to acknowledge that maybe, just maybe, the early failures in Korea had nothing to do with race. October 1951, the Army makes it official. The 24th Infantry Regiment is being disbanded. The official reason given, as part of military integration following President Truman's order, all black units are being dissolved and soldiers are being integrated into previously all-white units. The real reason, the 24th Infantry had become too politically problematic. The negative publicity, the narrative of black soldier incompetence. Easier to just disband them and scatter the soldiers into other units. For the soldiers of the 24th Infantry, this is a bitter end to a proud history. 82 years of service, multiple wars, countless acts of valor. And it ends not with honor, but with disgrace. The disbandment is framed as proof that the segregation critics were right all along, but for the wrong reasons. They argued, "See, the all-black regiment failed." But the lesson should have been, when you give soldiers inferior equipment, inadequate training, poor leadership, and then blame them for systemic failures, you create a self-fulfilling prophecy. The 24th Infantry didn't fail because they were black. They were blamed because they were black. When white units struggled in Korea, and they absolutely did, it was attributed to the difficulty of the war. When the 24th struggled under identical circumstances, it was attributed to racial inferiority. That's not military analysis. That's prejudice disguised as policy. For 50 years, the official narrative stood, the 24th Infantry Regiment failed in Korea. But starting in the 1990s, military historians began re-examining the Korean War records with fresh eyes. And what they found was damning evidence of what really happened. Equipment bias. Records show that the 24th Infantry consistently received older, worse-maintained equipment than white units. They were often given the hand-me-downs that white units had rejected. Leadership failures. The regiment had a disproportionate number of inexperienced or incompetent white officers. Officers who couldn't get assignments to prestigious white units got dumped into the 24th. Mission impossible. Operational orders show the 24th Infantry was often used as a fire brigade, rushed to plug gaps in defensive lines, thrown into the worst situations, expected to hold impossible positions without support. In 1996, historian William Bowers published a comprehensive study called Black Soldier, White Army. His conclusion? The 24th Infantry Regiment was scapegoated for failures that were systemic across the entire 8th Army. In 2003, the Army conducted its own review. They finally acknowledged that the historical narrative about the 24th Infantry was largely inaccurate and based on racial prejudice rather than objective combat analysis. But by 2003, most veterans of the 24th Infantry were dead. They died carrying the shame of a cowardice accusation that was a lie. A few were still alive when the truth came out. They received formal acknowledgments, apologies, but for most, vindication came too late. The damage was done. An entire generation of black soldiers was told they were failures. Families were shamed. History was distorted, all to protect a system that didn't want to admit that skin color has nothing to do with courage. This is the true story of the 24th Infantry Regiment, scapegoated for failures that weren't theirs, branded as cowards when they were heroes, disbanded in disgrace when they deserved honor. If this story moved you, if it made you angry, if it opened your eyes to how history can be manipulated, you need to do 3 things right now. First, hit that like button. Show respect for the soldiers who carried a lie for 50 years. Second, subscribe to this channel. We tell the stories that powerful institutions tried to bury. Third, share this video. Send it to someone. Post it on social media. These veterans deserve to have their names cleared, their service honored, their truth told. Drop a comment below. Had you heard of the 24th Infantry Regiment before? What other forgotten military injustices should we cover? The soldiers of the 24th Infantry Regiment fought for a country that refused to treat them as equals. They served with honor in a military that judged them by skin color instead of character. They deserved better. They deserved the truth. And 50 years later, we are finally telling it. This is WW2 Documents. Real history, real injustice, real heroes. Never forget the 24th Infantry Regiment. Never forget that sometimes the biggest battle isn't against the enemy. It's against the lies your own side tells about you. Thanks for watching.